Klute. Yeah, let's talk about John Klute. A very important film in the early 70s that I haven't seen. Yeah, we're doing one of those ones. This is. It's a first for a lot of stuff on this channel, actually. It's our first Pakula film. I think he's a fantastic director. I'm sure we'll be talking about him again. I think The Pelican Brief's good. I think we'll talk about that one eventually. I don't know. But he's not like the main focus I want to talk about with this episode. We're talking about two of my favorite actors when it comes to this one, too. Like, a couple months ago when we did Sabrina, I said Audrey Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart are probably my two favorite on screen actors ever. You could easily make the case that it is also the two leads of this film that I enjoy in everything they do. And this is our first time talking about both of them. I never thought the first Jane Fonda movie we'd talk about would be Klute, because I am the world's biggest Barbarella fan. I thought we'd get there first, but it's one of hers I haven't seen. It's her Oscar-winning performance, and I think it's the perfect time to talk about it, especially in like comparison to today's Oscar campaign, because you almost don't have Mikey Madison getting like the recognition she deserves for her role in Honora without the stuff that Jane Fonda was doing in this as Bree Daniels. And that's one of the things I think is very revolutionary. And I really think this movie is important and interesting while having its faults and talks about some stuff that I'm not particularly fascinated in. It is like one of those noir thrillers of the 70s that is slow paced and very atmospheric. It is very much a 70s film, just in terms of how we film everything and in terms of the story we are telling. It's just right on that cusp of like the period shifting, and we're going out of like this studio system and like the old Hollywood model into this becoming like a bigger budgeted film that is getting recognition and people are interested in talking about, and it's becoming a very popular thing. It's like right there in the middle of that movement with one of the most reactionary and revolutionary actresses of the time. I really like Jane Fonda. I think it goes without saying if you've seen any other videos on this channel where I talk about her in this capacity. I think she's fantastic, and I really like her in this period post Barbarella. She's just outspoken and an activist for all the most interesting and appropriate things. She is just putting her stamp on this industry and this like lifestyle in a way that we haven't really seen at the time before, especially in like the transitive period that is the 60s to 70s. Like, she was just out there and outspoken, and it's really cool to see that. And her doing a role like this, playing a call girl, an escort of sorts, it's very ambitious for her, because it's a stripped down performance that's taking her out of the limelight and giving you like a very secluded version of this actress. And she just nails it. Like, you can tell there was time and dedication put into what she was doing with how she wanted to present this role. And that makes it really special. And she is just phenomenal in this. It is one of her strongest performances. As we go through the movie a little bit, we'll talk about like some of the key moments, but she is just like one of those fixtures of the screen that when you see her, you're just like, oh yeah, that's what a movie star looks like. That is what a movie star looks like without being like a famous movie star. Like, she is both like a serious actor and one of the most important icons of film history, and that's like a really cool combination to have. And you compare that to a guy like Donald Sutherland, who is this unique face, and that's not me saying anything about his appearance, but he just has a unique face and a unique voice, and everything he does is just so interesting to see. He is so talented and so fascinating. I've watched a lot of his work recently because we lost him last year. And between like this and MASH coming out around the same time, you're like, this guy is transcendent. Like, what he is doing, how he like presents himself, you rarely see anything like it. He plays the title character of John Klute because it's like a detective story. Basically, he's from Pennsylvania, and there is a very important missing persons that he is friends with, and the wife and like the board of directors for this famous person, this important person, he's gone missing. And they hire Klute to go figure out what happened to him. They have like letters that were like sent to like a woman named Bree Daniels, so maybe his connection to Bree Daniels is the key to solving this crime and figuring out like what happened to, I think his name is Tom. I think Tom's the one that goes missing. So that's like a great hook. It's really fun, especially to take like the fish out of water, like he's like a Pennsylvania boy. He's going to the big city of New York. He's seeing the way the world changes, the way it moves. It's very fun. It is just a 70s film in its aesthetic, man. Oh, it looks gorgeous. I talk about this all the time when we go back to talk about these older films. But the way we just shoot like lights and colors, we just let things hold for a long time, and it's different. Like the only times in modern movies where we see these like dark shadows or just blacks on screen are in very selective horror movies, and not just any horror movies. Low budgeted horror movies is primarily where we see this stuff now. There's an entire sequence where we're just lighting the scene with a flashlight. And I'm like, this is gorgeous, and it's fully working. So you have this guy, Klute, who's kind of a detective. He's not like a real detective who solves like murder cases or stuff. He's also never been to the big city. He just wants to get to the bottom of like what happened to this guy he knows. That just leads him to meet Bree Daniels with a great introduction. You're just seeing two actors who are very revolutionary and reactionary to the 70s system of Hollywood, just working off each other in some of the most interesting and flattering ways possible. And I don't know how in depth we're going to get into like the actual plot of Klute, because it's kind of a lot of like meandering and these two trying to solve a crime, going from location to location to distill their brand of, criminality on things and figure out what's going on. We will talk about like the ending and like how it connects to everything, but it's a very atmospheric, very just be in the moment film. And that's really interesting, but it's kind of different when you have like a story that's like this neo-detective thing. I think it works really well though. Like the pacing, it's kind of slow, and I get that from like modern sensibilities. The way Klute goes about its story, it's very slow, but it's also kind of like building up the romance of these two and how they like kind of need each other and like each other. Klute's never met a girl like this before, and his pre-notions of like who she is, like, okay, this is a call girl, she's going to behave a certain way, she's going to look a certain way, she's going to like have a whole identity that he is just already like assuming for her, and then he gets to know her. She's a fully realized individual. Can you imagine a woman being fully realized in the 70s? like come on, that is what this story is about, because we spend a lot of time with Fonda in here. And Bree Daniels is a very well-written character. There are like hints of Hepburn and Holly Golightly that just show up in here. There's a little bit of Liza Minnelli and Cabaret. There's just a little bit of like all the classic stuff that you're taking inspiration from and shoving into like this woman who is very vulnerable and presenting herself in a way we haven't seen it before. The outfits are incredible, and the outfits that Bree in particular is wearing are gorgeous. There's just so many like tight clothing, big zippers, a lot of zipper play. It makes zippers look so romantic. You gotta respect it for that. Just a really unique way to present stuff. Fonda shows a lot of back, and that's kind of interesting, especially in like this part of her career. Like this is not a role a lot of other actresses of her caliber would take on. It's exactly how I felt about Audrey doing Holly Golightly. And that's like a different type of, woman of New York. This is real. I go to auditions all the time. Men just look at me and have opinions, and they say, you're not pretty enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not this thing. You just go on. And she somehow manages to afford a therapist, and some of the best stuff is in there. I really like it. She gets so many great moments in here. And look, Sutherland is just quietly doing great. Like, he just delivers the lines perfectly. But every scene where we just have holding on Fonda for a while, where we just see how she reacts. There's a sequence later on after they have sex, because of course they do. It's a detective story. What else are you going to expect from them? And she's talking to her therapist about how, like, she's met a good guy, and the fact that he's nice and, like, sees her as her scares her so much, so she's trying to push back. And the entire sequence, the things she is doing with, like, her hands and the way she's just behaving, it's very, very real. And it doesn't feel showy. It's loud. It is loud. But it's not like a showy way. It's just very naturalistic. And that's a really strong thing to see. She does phenomenal in here. I always liked her. I know I just said that, but this not like up to my appreciation for what Jane Fonda is and how she acts and behaves. It more or less just reminded me that this is like a real actress too. Like she can do the glitz and glamour stuff and have like the on Golden Pond stuff with her father, but this is just a strong, capable woman. I love to see that. And her hair is insane. I don't know how you have that hairdo. I don't know how you get it. It's crazy. I guess I just don't have any hair, so maybe that's just a problem. Roy Scheider is also in this. He plays her pimp. And we just talked about Blue Velvet. It's very much like the Dennis Hopper role in Blue Velvet. This angry guy who is scary. Like, he's scary in this. He's just like a really formative presence who just shows up and tries to send him on like a goose chase to find Alrin Page, who is just like perhaps the only person that can like identify who was like working with Tom and all that stuff. And that leads to a very interesting sequence too. I don't know what like people were viewing in terms of just drug depiction on screen at that point. Like we were like still a bit away from things like Taxi Driver and like the grit and grime of the world, but we do have Arlen Page and her like boyfriend as like drug addicts who are addicted to, I think it's heroin or something, and it just plays them off as like not schizophrenic, just very anxious and like addled and it's like twitching at every scene. And I don't know if like that's like the most intense depiction we've seen at the time, or if it's just this is what Hollywood expects us to do with this. We are a far cry from Train Spotting. It is very much just, these are drugs. Look at them. They're drug addicts. They're bad people. We don't like them. Like when Arlen dies, and she dies because somebody kills her. We'll come back to that in a minute here. Her boyfriend just literally goes, hey man, she was my connection. Can you give me money for drugs, please? Like, there's just no semblance of like learning his lesson. And I think that's more the era of Hollywood we're in than people actually having some defining characteristics. But let's just get to it. Like, it should be more of like a mystery, like trying to figure out who done it, but it kind of just tells you towards the end, like, we have Charles Coffey, I think it's Coffey. Charles Coffey shows up. He plays a guy called Peter Cable. He is like on the board with like Tom, so he's like, we gotta figure out what happened to Tom because he's missing. Well, we find out through a series of just like complicated stuff because Klute actually does his job well, and he's like, I figured out somebody who's going to give me the information. I just do like $500 to like buy the recordings that they have, so like I can connect it back to this, and this, and then Peter's like, okay, cool. Well, we'll send you the money. And then we learn as this scene progresses that it was actually Peter who committed the murder, and he was also the one that abused Bree earlier. So we learned that Tom was connected to like this guy 2 years ago when he met Bree. He did meet Bree, and Bree was assaulted during this moment. So she like passed off the guy to Arlen, and Arlen was also assaulted by this guy. They're both thinking that it was Tom, but actually the person that assaulted them was Peter Cable. Now, he covered up a lot of stuff, so he killed Tom, and he killed Arlen, and he's trying to kill Bree in a really intense sequence that looks gorgeous, and it's just listening to a audio recording for like a full minute, and on that full minute, we don't cut away. It's just holding on. Jane Fonda's face, as she slowly breaks down, she starts to cry, little like snot drips out of her nose, and it's just so intense and scary. And he's like going to kill her in like this like a fashionista, I guess it's just like the fashion district of New York City, the garment district, if you will, because one of her clients like is like a huge like mainstay in that industry, and she's about to be killed by him. And then we see Klute show up to fight off Peter, and eventually leads to him like being does he jump out the window or is he pushed? I can't remember, but he goes out like a window and he dies. You're like, okay, solve that problem. It's all wrapped up in a nice little bow, but it's got the ambiguous ending of a classic 70s film, which is just, is she going to leave with Klute and go back to Pennsylvania? Is that like what's about to happen? Or is she just saying like goodbye in this moment because neither of them can stay in this location, but they can't be together because of what they're doing? I really buy the relationship between Bree and John. I think it's handled very well. It's very soft. Like their sex scene is not like, you know, sexy or flashy. It's just she's using him, and he's like, I'm aware you're using me. It's just two people who are so kind of lost and alone, and like actually feel connection and kinship to these people who are taking interest in who they are. So they're drawn to each other because of that. But everything else around them is kind of crumbling and bad. But they have each other. And are they going to stay together, or are they just going to like hug in the apartment while it's all packed up, and we're going to like roll the credits before we ever get resolution? Yep, it's that one, because it's a 70s movie. It's not about like the happy ending. We don't get the denouement where there's like everyone's safe and good. It's just, we're done now. The story's over. You can leave the theater. And I really dig that. I really like all the performances in here. Sutherland's great. Fonda is transcendent as always. And it's just such an interesting piece, and I'm so glad I watched it. Just having modern interpretations and modern eyes on like this story of a call girl and her place in the world, and how men treat her, how the world treats her, how Hollywood treats this type of story. It is not flashy by any means, and that's exactly why Fonda deserves all of the accolades she has gotten for this performance. She is sexy and vulnerable at the same time, and that is a rare combo for Hollywood at the time. So she nails it. She gets it right. And for a detective story, while it is kind of slow in the middle, there are some very interesting setups, man. Like, so the camera placement, the cinematography, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's almost just like, I can't even describe it. It's like otherworldly, and that's Pakula just showing you, I know what I'm doing. Just trust me. Trust a good movie with good actors sometimes. Sometimes it's possible to make things good. But that's Klute. That's a classic tale of Hollywood, and that's where we're going to end this video. So thank you all for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.